$500,000 is the number on the listing. $1,080,000 is the number the listing doesn't show. That's the total amount of money that will leave a buyer's accounts over 30 years for a $500,000 house at current mortgage rates, including principal, interest, property taxes, homeowner's insurance, and basic maintenance. The gap between the listing price and the actual cost is $580,000. Nobody puts that number on the sign in the yard. This video does. I'm Warren. I've run the math on this purchase from every angle I can find, and the result isn't designed to discourage anyone from buying a house. It's designed to make sure the person signing the papers knows exactly what they're all signing for, because a house isn't a stock. It can't be sold in 30 seconds on a phone. And the math, once locked in, runs for 3 decades. The first number: income. A $500,000 house at the current 30-year fixed mortgage rate of roughly 6.25% with 20% down produces a monthly payment of about $2,460 in principal and interest alone. Add property taxes at an average rate of roughly 1% of the home's value, that's about $417 a month. Add homeowner's insurance at roughly $200 a month. The total monthly housing cost, about $3,100. The standard underwriting guideline used by nearly every lender says housing costs should not exceed 28% of gross monthly income. At $3,100 a month, 28% of gross income means the buyer needs a gross annual income of roughly $133,000. The median household income in the United States is about $84,000. That means the median American household falls roughly $50,000 short of the income needed to qualify for this mortgage. A physical therapist in Charlotte named Kai, earning about $72,000, sat across from a loan officer at Wells Fargo in January and heard this math for the first time. She'd been pre-approved for $375,000 based on her income and credit score. The $500,000 house she'd been saving for was 60% above what her income could support. She asked the loan officer what income she'd need. The answer: $133,000. She'd need a raise of roughly 85%, or a co-borrower, or a different house. The pre-approval letter she'd been carrying in her purse for 2 weeks, the one that felt like a ticket, turned out to be a receipt for a number she couldn't use. The second number: the down payment. 20% of $500,000 is $100,000. That's the threshold for avoiding private mortgage insurance, which adds between $70 and $200 a month to the payment depending on the loan amount and credit score. Most first-time buyers don't have $100,000 in liquid savings. The median first-time buyer in the United States puts down roughly 8%, according to the National Association of Realtors. 8% of $500,000 is $40,000. That sounds more reachable. But at $40,000 down, the loan amount jumps to $460,000. The monthly principal and interest rises to about $2,800, and PM1 adds roughly $140 a month. Total monthly payment with taxes and insurance, about $3,560. Income needed, over $152,000. The smaller the down payment, the higher the monthly cost and the higher the income bar. There's a third option that mortgage lenders promote aggressively: 3.5% down through an FHA loan. On a $500,000 house, that's $17,500. The loan amount, $482,500. Monthly PMI on an FHA loan, roughly $240, and unlike conventional PMI, FHA mortgage insurance doesn't automatically drop off when equity reaches 20%. It stays for the life of the loan unless the borrower refinances. Total monthly payment, roughly $3,700. Income required, close to $160,000. The lowest down payment option produces the highest monthly cost and the highest income requirement. That inversion is the part the 3.5% marketing doesn't mention. Kai had saved $28,000 for a down payment. On a $500,000 house, that's less than 6%. She would have needed PMI. On a $375,000 house, $28,000 is about 7.5%. Still below 20, still PMI. She asked the loan officer what house price her $28,000 would cover at 20% down. The answer: $140,000. A one-bedroom condo in most Charlotte suburbs. The gap between the 20% ideal and the reality of most buyers' savings accounts is the second crack in the housing math that nobody in real estate advertising addresses directly. The third number: hidden costs. The listing price and the mortgage payment are the visible costs. The hidden costs are the ones that accumulate silently and add 6 figures to the total over 30 years. If you've ever heard a homeowner say they didn't realize how much the house actually cost, this is what they mean. Maintenance. The standard estimate is 1% of the home's value per year. On a $500,000 house, that's $5,000 a year, or about $417 a month. Over 30 years, $150,000. That covers the roof replacement at year 15, roughly $12,000 to $18,000. The HVAC system at year 12, roughly $8,000 to $12,000. The water heater every 10 years, roughly $2,000. Exterior paint every 7 to 10 years, $4,000 to $8,000. Plumbing repairs, appliance replacements, the dishwasher that stops draining on a Sunday night, the garage door opener that fails in January. None of these appear in the mortgage payment. All of them arrive, and they arrive whether the homeowner has budgeted for them or not. Kai didn't know about the 1% rule until the loan officer mentioned it almost as an afterthought during the meeting. Closing costs, typically 3 to 5% of the purchase price. On $500,000, that's $15,000 to $25,000 due at signing. This number surprises almost every first-time buyer because it doesn't appear in any of the early conversations about affordability. The pre-approval letter doesn't mention it. The Zillow estimate doesn't include it. The real estate agent's monthly payment calculator doesn't factor it in. Most first-time buyers don't budget for this separately from the down payment, which means the actual cash needed at the table for a 20% down purchase is $100,000 in down payment, plus roughly $20,000 in closing costs. $120,000 in cash before the first mortgage payment is made. HOA fees, if applicable. The median HOA fee in the United States is roughly $250 a month. Over 30 years, $90,000. Not every home has an HOA, but in newer developments, planned communities, and condos, they're nearly universal. And HOA fees increase over time, typically 3 to 5% per year, which means the $250 today is $400 in 10 years. Property tax increases. The 1% rate used in this calculation is an average. In New Jersey, the effective rate is over 2%. In Texas, roughly 1.6%. In Illinois, roughly 2.1%. And property taxes rise with assessed value, which means the $417 a month calculated at purchase could be $600 or more within 10 years. If you live in a high-tax state, the property tax alone can exceed $1,000 a month by year 20. Over 30 years, the cumulative property tax on a $500,000 home that appreciates to $700,000 is roughly $200,000 or more. Add it up. On a $500,000 house with 20% down at 6.25% over 30 years, principal and interest totals roughly $886,000. Property taxes over 30 years, approximately $170,000. Insurance, approximately $72,000. Maintenance, $150,000. Closing costs, $20,000 total, roughly $1,300,000. For a house that was listed at $500,000, the listing price is 38% of the actual cost. The other 62% never appears on any advertisement, any Zillow page, or any open house brochure. Kai didn't buy the $500,000 house. She sat with the numbers for about a week after the Wells Fargo meeting, running variations on her phone calculator during lunch breaks, and the math kept arriving at the same conclusion. She bought a townhouse in a Charlotte suburb for $280,000, put 20% down with her $28,000 covering about half and a gift from her parents covering the rest, and her monthly payment including taxes and insurance came to roughly $1,900. That's within the 28% guideline on her $72,000 salary. She kept her Roth IRA contributions running. She kept the split deposit from Video 8. She didn't stretch. The townhouse wasn't the dream house. It was a 2-bedroom with a small patio and a parking pad instead of a garage. But the math worked. And in this series, the math working is the definition of a good decision. Kai told me later that the hardest part wasn't accepting the lower price. It was telling her friends. 3 of them had bought in the $400,000 to $500,000 range, and 2 of them were already struggling with payments by month 8. One had dipped into her emergency fund to cover a property tax bill she hadn't anticipated. The other was carrying a credit card balance for the first time in 4 years because the furnace died in November. Kai's townhouse at $280,000 was the least expensive purchase in her friend group, and the only one that left the rest of her financial architecture intact. Here's the calculation most real estate content avoids entirely, and it's the one that reframes the entire purchase decision. The opportunity cost. If Kai had taken her $100,000 down payment, the full amount she would have needed for the $500,000 house, and instead invested it in a total stock market index fund at 7% average annual return, that $100,000 would grow to roughly $760,000 over 30 years. She'd also avoid 30 years of maintenance, property tax increases, and insurance costs on the higher value home. The invested capital would compound while the house structure depreciates even as land value may appreciate. If you've never run this comparison for your own situation, the result is usually sobering. The house feels like building equity. The investment actually builds equity, quietly, in the background, at 7% a year with zero maintenance calls on a Saturday morning. This doesn't mean renting is always better than buying. It means the comparison needs to include both sides of the ledger. The house offers stability, equity buildup through principal payments, and potential appreciation. The investment offers liquidity, compound growth, and zero maintenance costs. The right answer depends on the city, the price-to-rent ratio, the person's career stability, and how long they plan to stay. If you plan to live in the same city for at least 7 years, buying tends to make financial sense in most markets. If the timeline is shorter, the closing costs, transaction fees, and early mortgage payments that are almost entirely interest make selling at a loss more likely than most buyers realize. There is no universal answer. Anyone who tells you buying is always better or renting is always better hasn't run the math for a specific situation. The protocol for this decision fits on one page. First, calculate the true monthly cost: principal, interest, TAYS insurance, PMI if applicable, and maintenance at roughly $400 a month. If that total exceeds 28% of gross income, the house is too expensive. Full stop. No amount of desire changes the ratio. Second, check the down payment. If it's below 20%, calculate the PMI cost and add it to the monthly total. If the total still fits within 28%, proceed with awareness of the added cost. If it doesn't, save longer or look at a lower price point. Third, run the 30-year total and compare it to the 30-year outcome of investing the same down payment and the monthly difference between owning and renting. If buying still wins after the full comparison, buy. If it doesn't, rent and invest the difference. The calculator is free. The decision to skip it is expensive. If you're currently looking at houses and the monthly payment would stretch beyond the 28% line, this video is the math telling you what the real estate agent won't. The house might be beautiful. The neighborhood might be perfect. The school district might be ideal. But the ratio doesn't care about any of that. The ratio cares about income versus obligation. And when the obligation outpaces the income, the house stops being an asset and starts being a trap. Every homeowner who's been foreclosed on started with a monthly payment they believed they could handle. The housing market in 2026 is asking most Americans a question they can't answer with their current income. 75% of households can't afford a median-priced new home. A $500,000 house requires an income that roughly 60% of the country doesn't earn. The numbers aren't hostile, they're just arithmetic. And arithmetic doesn't negotiate with desire. Next, the rule that explains why compound interest feels broken for the first 8 years and then suddenly isn't. The 8-4-3 rule. 3 phases of the same curve, 3 completely different experiences of time. The math from this video will make a lot more sense after that one.